Okay, great. Welcome everybody to the regular Bellevue City Council meeting for February 1st, 2021. Clerk, could you please do the roll?
Mayor Robertson.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Neuenhaus.
Here.
Councilmember Barksdale.
Here.
Councilmember Lee.
Here.
Councilmember Robertson.
I'm here.
Councilmember Stokes.
Here.
And Councilmember Zahn.
Here.
Thank you.
Councilmember Zahn, could you lead us in the flag salute, please?
Certainly, Mayor. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Great. Okay, City Clerk, how about oral communications? Do we have people signed up for tonight?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this evening there are 6 pre-registered speakers. 4 of those speakers are in support of item 10A on our agenda. So unfortunately, pursuant to council rules, only 3 will be allowed to speak. And with that, I will call our first speaker, who is Randy Baneker. Mr. Baneker, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Okay, thank you. Madam Mayor and members of the council, I'm Randy Baneker here on behalf of the Seattle-King County Realtors. Tonight, I'd like to thank you for your work on the accessory dwelling unit and unit lot subdivision land use code amendments, and I'd like to encourage your support of the package. These 2 code amendments represent important housing affordability strategies and expanded homeownership opportunities consistent with the city's affordable housing strategy. ADUs are a great tool to inject some affordability into the city while contributing to neighborhood quality and stability through the flexibility these units offer homeowners. ADUs offer an income stream to help with the mortgage or other expenses. This can allow homeowners on fixed incomes to age in place by renting the ADU or moving into the ADU and renting the primary residence. Some families use ADUs for intergenerational living, which can be a tremendous help caring for aging parents or enabling grandparents to take care of grandkids. Unit lot subdivisions offer a fee-simple alternative to condominium ownership. This is important because condominium construction liability, while easing through amendments to the State Condominium Act, remains a costly barrier to new condo construction. As a result, condos affordable to middle income earners are not being built in the numbers we'd like to see them. Unit lot subdivisions offer a viable alternative. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Baneker. The next speaker on the list is Emmanuel Solis. Mr. Solis, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Madam Mayor and council members, my name is Emmanuel Solis. My address is already part of the record. I am thankful for the opportunity to address you representing a diverse group of citizens from Northeast Bellevue. Our comments are in regard to the land use code amendments related to the city affordable housing strategy. As responsible and engaged citizens of Bellevue, we are glad that the city is focusing on the complex problem of affordable housing in our city. We are speaking in support of the current recommendation from the Planning Commission that allows ADUs to be built at the time of new construction for single-family houses. The removal of the 3 years waiting period will likely result in more units being available in the market. While we support this particular recommendation, we are also concerned on how the topic related to ADU has been driven by builder associations and other corporations, and how the scope of the recommendations change at the Planning Commission stage. We do not want our community to become an investor's paradise, short-term rentals or parking lots. Therefore, we do not support removal of the owner occupancy requirement, the off-street parking requirements, nor expanding the scope to include detached ADUs. We will solve the affordability problem as a community. We are all going to have to contribute to this solution, neighborhoods included. We believe that there are much more efficient ways to provide affordable housing at optimal locations with the infrastructure and transportation investment that must come with it. We want to make sure that your current residents are also part of the consideration and their voices are also heard when talking about affordable housing. As citizens and homeowners, we want to contribute and provide input into this serious problem. After all, we are also gonna live here once the builders finish their work and recoup their investments. Ultimately, what we want is that we want to solve the problem, but also preserve our neighborhood character. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Solis. The next speaker is Michelle Wannamaker. Ms. Wannamaker, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, your time begins now.
Thank you for the opportunity to address you. My name is Michelle Wannamaker. I live in Eastgate and my address is on file. We've had a huge amount of new construction homes built in Eastgate in the last 5 to 6 years, and to the best of my knowledge, they have all been McMansions. And if I thought this proposal to remove the 3-year wait period on building ADUs on new construction homes would help the affordable housing crisis, I would be more in support of it, but it won't. I've heard the council, the planning commission, and staff all refer to this proposal as a means of helping long-term residents continue to remain in their neighborhood. And I have no doubt that this is how the developer sold this proposal to you. Well, the flaw in your plan is there is nothing that ensures pricing will remain low. And greed, it's human nature, those new McMansion owners will try to get as much as they can for rent. I was appalled when I listened to the planning commission meeting in which the hearing on this proposal was held. All but one commissioner was attempting to go beyond what you proposed by removing the parking requirements, removing the owner occupancy requirement, allowing DADUs, plus allowing the property owner to rent out the main house, ADU, and DADU all at the same time, all to different renters. That's multifamily housing. Eastgate and other neighborhoods with moderately priced homes were built in the 50s with single car driveways, garages, and carports. So many homes already have one or more cars parked at the curb. And so far, I have only heard reference to the ADU being rented out. Whereas in Eastgate, I have 2 cases near me in which the owner lives in the DADU, which are grandfathered in, and rents out the main house. Each has at least 1 parking space for the DADU, but there is not adequate parking for the main house. In this case, the owner and tenants have 4 vehicles parked on the street every night. The city council needs to step back and revisit the parking issue for ADUs. Since you don't know if it will be the ADU or the main house that gets rented out, you need to look at them as a whole and calculate needed parking. Eastgate already has a lot of rentals, but removing owner occupancy requirements and allowing DADUs would change our family-oriented neighborhood into a business-oriented and investor-oriented culture. So why should the 3-year wait period be retained? Because it gives new residents an opportunity to become and feel like they are part of the community. When that is the case, they are less likely to do something that will negatively impact their neighbors. It will help to preserve the value of community and the qualities that have allowed us to win some of the most livable cities awards. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Wannamaker. The next speaker on the list is Pamela Johnston. And Ms. Johnston, can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Your time begins now.
Bellevue has been a regional leader in planning for growth. The council has seriously considered citizen participation and the level of services and infrastructure in planning the process. The local planning of downtown, Bellevue, Wilburton, and in the future Factoria have been essential to our growth strategy. Great neighborhoods will add the legacy of community-centered, forward-thinking. Bellevue has matched or exceeded its GMA growth metrics. In the State Senate, Bill 5253, titled Increasing Housing Unit Inventory by Removing Arbitrary Limits on housing options. The state is usurping the local planning rights. It is not clear to me why the state is superseding the jurisdiction of the local planning and retroactively setting timelines outside of the GMA process. This is not how we've conducted planning in the past. The bill appears to mandate owner occupancy not required in ADUs, no regulations on the number of unrelated people in dwelling unit. Unclear to me what changed and was it from encouraged to required from the 2020 bill. Bellevue has committed to doing comprehensive planning right. We have used the GMA framework throughout the comprehensive plan. We have used the GMA timeline with the next plan due in 2024. Bellevue has been committed to planning. Please consider taking action to reject the state from usurping local planning scope and timeline. Let us continue to achieve great results the Bellevue way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnston. The next speaker is Jared Axelrod. Mr. Axelrod, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Your time begins now.
Great. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, members of the council. My name is Jared Axelrod. I lead local public policy and external affairs for Amazon. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. Here this evening to speak in support of item 10A on your agenda, the LUCA, which would amend the city's accessory dwelling unit policy. I'll start by saying that Amazon believes that all people should have access to housing they can afford. While only governments at the local, state, and federal level have the capacity to implement more effective housing policies, we believe the private and public sectors can work together to address this challenge, and we will use our position as a large employer to support innovative housing affordability initiatives. And this LUCA does just that. Amazon supports the city's effort to modify and update the land use code to allow ADUs to be built at the time of construction. And as I mentioned at the Planning Commission, when this was reviewed, when they reviewed this LUCA, and as you'll see in the recommendation provided by the Commission that they transmitted to the Council, we also encourage the Council to use this opportunity to consider some further modifications to the land use code in this area to spur the build out of new ADUs and make housing more affordable in a few ways. First, the current code requires that either the primary residence or the ADU must be occupied by an owner of the property. This requirement is a limiting factor to adding supply to the market for ADUs, and as studies have shown, often makes financing less available and more expensive when this additional source of rental income cannot be recouped by the owner. And we'd encourage the Council to explore removing this requirement to add more access to ADUs for more renters. Second, the current code requires one off-street parking space for the ADU in addition to any off-street parking for the primary residence. The Council should consider removing this requirement for ADUs within proximity to frequent transit service, as is currently being considered by the Planning Commission for other residential developments. And third, the current code prohibits detached accessory dwelling units, or DADUs, including guest cottages and detached garages. These prevent homeowners from using one of the easiest and least expensive methods for creating an ADU, such as using a detached garage. The Council should consider removing this prohibition. I'd also like to suggest that the Council use this opportunity while you're studying this LUCA to make the modifications here, rather than seeking a second subsequent modification to the land use code in this way. Affordable housing is an urgent priority, and the Council should use this opportunity with the current LUCA to act with urgency. Doing so will save valuable staff time and let the Council and the Commission continue to study and develop other affordable housing policies on the docket as put forward in the city's affordable housing strategy. I want to conclude by thanking the Council for your consideration and work on this important matter, and we look forward to continuing to work with you and the city to spur more affordable housing solutions for Bellevue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Axelrod. The final pre-registered speaker this evening was going to speak in support of the item 10A, the ADU LUCAs. We have already had 3 speakers in support. We've had 2 speakers with opposition or concern. So at this point, I would ask, is there anyone connected to this call this evening that would like to make comment to the Council? If so, please use the raise hand function or *9 if you're connected with a phone. And again, we cannot have any more speakers in support of item 10A, and there is 1 slot left in opposition. Ms. Hummer, I saw your hand first. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Good. I'm honored to speak before the council and Mayor Robinson. I agree with the others, Bellevue citizens who spoke about the ADU and the mother-in-law apartments, as I call them, and the townhome land use code amendments. I agree that eliminating the 3-year wait period would be a good idea, but I would like the council to just stick with that and steer clear of changing the owner occupation restriction and the parking restriction, and put the detached accessory dwelling units to the neighborhoods as you originally said. Also at the Planning Commission meeting, there was another speaker who requested the consideration of at least a 3-month rental agreement on the attached dwelling units or accessory dwelling units to provide more stability in the neighborhood. Otherwise, it would be just a revolving door, and as we heard from Ms. Wannamaker, just an investor's dream instead of a homeowner's dream. And I also heard from Facebook friends that mentioned anybody who can afford a house in Bellevue really doesn't need at this time the extra income that might be provided from a mother-in-law apartment. Also, as the planning commissioners pointed out, chances of it being affordable in whatever terms that might be, it would be more likely to be a market rate rental. And I just have always wondered why the townhomes where you own the property and your portion of the attached wall unit were not previously allowed in multifamily developments. I hope that that's clarified during the meeting. It sounds like a good idea here in East Bellevue between 140th and 148th. We have representations of all the various forms of housing available, multifamily, condos. The townhomes are on an R5 developed or zoned area. Then down the street, we have condos. And then we have the R10s, R20s, R30s that have apartment houses, as well as duplexes and fourplexes and triplexes. So that all sounds, I wish that the rest of Bellevue is as well integrated in their diversity of housing and as East Bellevue is. So I hope that this helps that happen. I also wonder, you know, when they talk about affordable for those townhomes, and that was one of the first things that the Planning Commission pointed out, is they're not going to be really affordable. Even the condos where they're just owning the unit, those still are valued at like $500,000 to $800,000 a piece up here in East Bellevue. So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I hope we're looking forward to hearing from the council.
Thank you, Ms. Hummer. At this point, we have had 3 speakers on either side of item 10A on tonight's agenda. I would ask if there is anyone else connected to this call who would like to make comment to the council on another subject. If so, please use the raise hand function or *9 if you're connected with a phone. And Ms. Dean, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you. Your time begins now.
Good evening, Mayor, council members, and city staff. This is Heidi Dean calling in from Newport Hills. And I don't know how many of you are following along what's going on down in Factoria. I just came from a Facebook discussion with people. There is a Facebook page that some of you may be aware of. It's called Factoria Looks Like Bleep. And because we are having continued problems with people deciding that they are going to live on the street next to Walmart. It started off with a couple of RVs there over the years and has now progressed to people with decommissioned Metro buses, 2 of them, box trucks that are being used as campers or RVs. And now at this point on Friday, one of those box truck people decided to dump all of their stuff out onto the sidewalk area, the parking strip next to where they were parked, and leave it there. So there's growing concern. That was also the area where the 2 kids that murdered that man out in the May Valley were living in their car there in Factoria, right on that street. We're starting to feel like we don't know what's happening. We have an ordinance that passed. We were told that when CFH opened year-round and we could offer year-round shelter, that public camping like this wouldn't be allowed, but yet it is continued. It is allowed. There's a tent up in Eastgate that's still there. A new one popped up apparently at the Mormon church now. We'd like to know what's going on. Why is our ordinance not being enforced? We've been told that it's pandemic. We can't overcrowd the shelters. And I get that, truly. But I'd like to know, why is King County not doing anything with those tents, the big hospital tents that they set up on the county property where the CFH shelter is going to go? They set them up at the beginning of this pandemic. We paid for them as county taxpayers. We paid to buy them, we paid to set them up, and we're paying for their maintenance, and they've never been used. Why is the city of Bellevue not asking King County Council, and particularly the chairperson, Claudia Balducci, our former mayor, why we cannot put some of these folks who are still living out on our streets into those tents, at least for the meantime, before finding shelter, instead of allowing them to live out on the streets like this? It's not safe, it's not sanitary, and South Bellevue's getting fed up. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Dean. And at this point, we have a few moments left in oral communications. Is there anyone else who would like to make comment to the City Council this evening? Please use the raise hand function or *9 if you're connected with a phone. Okay, Mayor, I do not see any additional hands for this evening.
Okay, thank you. You know, Mr. Miyake, I know we have a compassionate enforcement program going on with our campers and trailers on the road. I'm going to consider that an official complaint from a constituent. So if you could have somebody follow up with that, that'd be great.
We certainly will, Mayor.
Thank you. Okay, so moving on to the consent calendar, is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Okay, so we're moving on to our study session items. We have 2 meaty items to discuss tonight, and I'm looking forward to the presentations. Mr. Miyake, would you like to introduce, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor and council members. As you mentioned, we have 2 items. The first one is our recommended land use code amendments related to the city's affordable housing strategy. Excuse me. Tonight, the council will hear about 2 land use code amendments related. The first one being to remove the 3-year wait period to allow the accessory dwelling units to be built in a new single-family home sooner. The second is a land use code amendment to establish provisions for unit lot subdivisions in the city where multifamily development is currently allowed. The Planning Commission did take up both these land use code amendments recently, as well as held public hearings on them. And the Planning Commission is recommending adoption of both these land use code amendments. Joining us this evening to provide a staff report is Mike Brennan, Trisna Tanis, Nick Whipple, all from the Development Services Department. As also joining us this evening is Radhika Mogakar, who is the chair of the Planning Commission, and present the Planning Commission's recommendation. We are looking for direction from the council to bring back an ordinance possibly for final action at a future meeting. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Mike Brennan, the director. Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Miyake. Good evening, Mayor Robinson, Councilmember Newenhouse, or Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and council members. As City Manager Miyake mentioned, we are advancing 2 land use code amendments for council consideration this evening, both recommended by the Planning Commission, which you'll hear more from the chair a bit later on that recommendation. As Mr. Miyake mentioned, these are both related to the city's affordable housing strategy, eliminating the 3-year wait for adding an ADU to a new home, and then the unit lot subdivision, which essentially allows for the owning of the townhome and the land that it sits on as a form of housing. Again, these do align with the council's affordable housing strategy and by eliminating barriers to promote more housing options in the city. I'm going to hand it over to Trisna Tanis, who's going to provide some additional background. And again, as a reminder, we are seeking council direction this evening to bring these ordinances back for final action at a date likely later this month if the council agrees to advance them further. Trisna, go ahead.
Thank you, Mike. Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, council members, City Manager Miyake, and those attending tonight. For staff's presentation, we will begin by giving a brief explanation about each of the recommended land use code amendments, or LUCAs, starting with the ADU LUCA and then the unit lot subdivision LUCA. We will talk about the public engagement that we've had with the community and the development community, as well as the residential communities. After Planning Commission Chair Mulgavkar will present the Planning Commission recommendation for these LUCAs. We will then provide additional information on items related to the AD LUCAs. We will close with providing information about the process that we've gone through for these LUCAs and our anticipated next steps. And lastly, we will recap with asking for direction from council. So to begin, I want to briefly touch on the city's affordable housing strategy, which the City Council adopted in 2017. The affordable housing strategy included several strategies, and within each strategy, there is a number of action items. One of the strategies, strategy B, is to create a variety of housing choices. And under this strategy, action B2 is to update the city's ADU regulations to accomplish the creation of additional housing units and choices. This LUCA implements action B2, while neither action B2 or this LUCA is intended or expected to create affordable housing units. We are anticipating that this LUCA will result in the creation of more affordable housing and an increase in housing supply generally. It is also worth pointing out that ADUs provide diversity in housing size, type, geographic location, and cultural options, therefore helping to ensure all residents are welcomed and allow for long-term residents to remain in Bellevue. To provide an orientation to the city's ADU regulations, I want to start by giving a quick overview of what we have in place. The regulations that we have for ADUs, that's in Land Use Code 2020-120, were established back in 1993. That ordinance attempted to achieve a balance between encouraging ADUs as additional housing units so that it could serve the city's residents while maintaining compatibility with single-family neighborhoods. The only provision that is included in this LUCA is the one that's highlighted in yellow, which is to remove the 3-year rule, which I'll explain shortly. The remaining provisions in this section of the Land Use Code are not included in this LUCA, but I think it's worthwhile to just go through the requirements with you tonight. There is a requirement that only one ADU is allowed, and that ADU must be attached to the primary residence. And the property owner must occupy either the primary residence or the ADU. The combined number of occupants who live in the primary residence as well as ADU in a combined total cannot exceed 4 unrelated adults, or the definition of family in the Land Use Code. The ADU must be at least 300 square feet and cannot exceed 800 square feet. It also cannot exceed 40% of the total square feet of the home. There's a requirement for minimum 1 space parking dedicated for that ADU. Detached ADUs are prohibited. as well as transient or Airbnb rentals. Those types of rentals are prohibited when there is an ADU on the property. So as noted earlier, Action B2 is to update the city's ADU regulations to add housing units and choices. This recommended LUCA is a targeted update in that this LUCA is only to remove the 3-year wait period imposed on new construction. This would allow an ADU to be built and established at the same time a single family is built. This narrow change in the city's ADU regulations is anticipated to make ADUs more feasible to build and encourage construction of this type of housing options in residential neighborhoods. By way of permitting and construction data, in 2020, the city had 5 registrations for new ADUs, and in 2019, there were 8. In comparison, the city had 149 new single-family building permits issued in 2020. Out of this 149 new single-family building permits, nearly 25% included space or elements such as the wet bar or water line connection, cabinets, or refrigerator to make it easier to build and establish a future ADU after that 3-year wait. This 3-year wait has been a barrier to adding this type of housing unit and housing option. So this LUCA removes this barrier so that a property owner may install an ADU in an efficient and cost-effective way at the same time that they are constructing their new home, and to be able to register and use that additional dwelling unit as soon as they get their final inspection and occupancy approval. So with that, I'm going to turn over the presentation to Mr. Whipple to go through the unit lot subdivision LUCA. Nick?
Great. Thank you, Trisna. And good evening, Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Newenhouse, and members of the council. In the next slides, I will cover the proposed unit lot subdivision land use code amendment, the second land use code amendment that we'll be discussing this evening. In the next slides, we'll go over what we anticipate the outcomes of this code adoption would be, what our public engagement process has been like for both of these land use code amendments, and then we'll have the chair of the Planning Commission here to present as well. So one of the objectives of this LUCA is to respond to the Affordable Housing Strategy B, which calls for the creation of a variety of housing choices in the city. Unit lot subdivisions are a tool that's typically used to produce townhomes. And while townhomes created by the provisions of the proposed land use code are not anticipated to be income restricted or affordable housing units per se, there is still value in this land use code amendment and a relationship to the city's affordable housing strategy. So given the magnitude of the region's housing crisis, a broad range of solutions are needed to address the crisis from multiple angles. So this LUCA is intended to minimize some of the barriers that we've heard to increase the supply of housing in Bellevue, promote a different type of housing in the city, and also broaden home ownership opportunities in Bellevue. So in terms of minimizing barriers to increase the supply of housing, currently townhomes may be constructed in the city as planned unit developments or as multifamily development condominiums. A PUD or planned unit development is often utilized when there's a need for a special development feature, oftentimes due to critical areas, and it entails its own specialized process. The other process that we would develop or allow for the development of townhomes would be through a condominium. So the development community, including the Master Builders Association of King and Snohomish counties, has reported barriers related to the construction and mortgage financing of condo projects. We've heard that the liability of a project designated as a condo does require more costly insurance for developers, contractors, and subcontractors, which oftentimes makes this housing type more expensive to build and infeasible for many of their developers. The financing barriers tend to discourage developers from building condos in Bellevue, which limits the city's housing supply and places upward pressure on home prices. So minimizing barriers identified will help make townhome development attractive in Bellevue and increase the overall housing supply built in the city. This LUCA also will promote a diversity in housing type. So townhomes are sometimes a desirable alternative to stacked apartments and can increase available choices for additional economic segments of the population. And last, the LUCA will broaden homeownership opportunities. So townhomes developed as a unit lot subdivision allow for additional fee simple ownership opportunities in the city. Fee simple ownership provides building and land ownership as opposed to condo ownership, which provides just for the inside space of a townhome. Next slide, please. The unit lot subdivision land use code amendment will amend land use code chapters 2045A, platting and subdivisions, and 2045B, short plats and short subdivisions, to allow for fee simple ownership opportunities in the city. The distinction between the two chapters, so 2045A, platting and subdivision, refers to projects that propose 10 or more units, and then 2045B refers to projects that are 9 or fewer units. The amendment to both chapters will add a new subsection, which applies exclusively to the unit lot subdivision of land in multifamily zoned properties. The land use code amendment includes a new definition section to introduce terms that will now be used throughout this amended subsection. It will also include general requirements for unit lot subdivisions. The general requirements, which we'll get to in the next slide, refer to the dimensional standards that apply to this type of development, as well as some of the other standards that may be modified to accommodate this type of development. There's also a new subsection created that will label this type of development as a unit lot subdivision. And it will also, in this subsection, clarify that the unit lots are not separate building sites, meaning that the design and the layout is based on the parent lot, and any future platting actions, any building additions or modifications must conform to the requirements of the parent lot that's created, which we'll get into in the next slide. Just for reference, the strike draft is included as attachment F in your materials. And to the next bullet, the proposed land use code amendment will allow for unit lot subdivisions in land use districts where multifamily development may be built currently. This includes about 17% of the land in Bellevue, including our multifamily residential districts, Factoria, our office and limited business district, downtown, most of Belred, and the Eastgate TOD district. And as mentioned in the previous slide, the unit lot subdivision is typically used to create or to produce townhomes. And given that the city has significant zoning capacity for housing development, in this multifamily housing type specifically, the proposed LUCA will encourage the construction of townhouses in Bellevue and allow for home builders to take advantage of this zoning capacity. Next slide, please. So as illustrated in the diagram on this slide, unit lot subdivisions are a mechanism to allow platting where it's not currently feasible due to conflicts between characteristics of certain development types and the applicable dimensional standards. Unit lot subdivisions create a distinction between the original lot or the parent lot and the lots created within that original parent lot, which are called unit lots for the purposes of regulating. The provisions apply development standards to the parent lot rather than the individual unit lots. So under the current code, individual townhomes cannot be separated into individual lots since side setback requirements, as an example, from the lot lines would coincide with a shared wall. Other dimensional requirements like lot coverage by structure, impervious surface coverage limits could be challenging to meet on a per unit lot basis. So this proposed LUCA would apply these types of standards, the relaxation of these types of standards to the parent lot rather than those individual unit lots. The LUCA is anticipated to encourage infill development and increase the number of housing units in Bellevue. So as mentioned earlier, the city has that significant zoning capacity for multifamily housing. And this LUCA is intended to remove barriers associated with condo style development to allow greater opportunities for townhomes in Bellevue. The LUCA will create individual fee simple ownership of townhome units. So broadening home ownership opportunities to include more fee simple purchase options will increase housing choices in Bellevue, provide an alternative to condominium ownership, and provide a less expensive option than detached single-family homes. And the LUCA is not, it will not change the allowed density. So a builder may build the same number of units in a unit lot subdivision as they would be able to build under a current code as a condominium development. And then there is, last thing, there's no change to the appearance of a townhouse developed as a unit lot subdivision. So again, the only difference between a townhouse developed under the current code and a townhouse developed as a unit lot subdivision is just the form of ownership, condo versus fee simple. Next slide, please. So now I'll walk us through just the engagement that occurred for these two land use code amendments. The purpose of the public engagement that we set out on was to inform the public of the substance of both land use code amendments and help people to understand how they can engage in the amendment process. With that, staff provided 3 modes of outreach. So we do have process 4 requirements in the land use code. Those requirements include a notice of application, our SEPA notification, notice of hearing, etc. So all of the process 4 requirements were followed. We also implemented enhanced engagement, which included direct engagement and feedback with stakeholders. So staff had ongoing dialogue with the Master Builders Association of King and Snohomish County. We also spoke with developers, potential applicants, and just interested members of the public regarding the 2 land use code amendments. And lastly, we encouraged engagement through our online presence. So staff launched 2 web pages. We provided information related to each of the code amendments, both the ADU and the unit lot subdivision amendments. The web pages were updated frequently to include status changes, documenting the LUCA progress. We also included the strike draft amendment. The staff report and recommendation was a part of that web page, and information about the Planning Commission's recent recommendation, as well as contact information for public comment. Next slide, please. And now I will turn the presentation over to Chair Mulgofkar to walk us through the Planning Commission recommendation on both LUCAs. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Trisna, for the presentation, and thanks to the council for having me. So during the Planning Commission's December 9th session, the Commission heard public support for the proposed amendment, and after discussion, the Planning Commission directed staff to prepare the LUCA for a public hearing. On January 13th, the Planning Commission held a public hearing for the proposed ADA LUCA. Many members of the public provided testimony during the public hearing. Oral communications supported the proposed LUCA to remove the 3-year wait period, and many people commenting raised additional provisions in the city's ADU land use code chapter that should be considered by the Planning Commission for future changes. Upon further discussion, the Planning Commission recommended by a vote of 5-1 that the City Council adopt the accessory dwelling unit land use code amendment to remove the 3-year wait period without modification. Since the LUCA meets the decision criteria of LUC 2030 J135 and is consistent with the comprehensive plan, enhances the public safety and welfare, and is not contrary to the best interests of the citizens and property owners of the City of Bellevue. The recommendation is included in the Planning Commission's resolution as attachment A of your packet today. In addition, the resolution had another request from the Planning Commission for Council. It requested that Council consider further amendments to the ADU regulations based on public testimony and discussion. Many people spoke to the benefits of the ADUs, that they provide incremental housing supply and allow residents to age in place. Certain individuals also suggested other changes to the city's ADU regulations, including eliminating requirements for owner-occupied occupancy, off-street parking, and the restriction on detached ADUs. Many people offered testimony for and against further changes to the city's ADU regulation during the public hearing and subsequent written communications with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission is aware that the Council has made a policy decision to allow detached accessory dwelling units in self-selected neighborhoods and that this process is underway with the Great Neighborhoods Initiative. And with that, I would appreciate the next slide. Similarly, during the Planning Commission's December 9th study session, staff also presented the LUCA to establish provisions in the Land Use Code Amendment for unit lot subdivisions within land use districts where multifamily development is currently allowed. Commissioners again heard public testimony, public support for the proposed amendment, and in our discussion of the LUCA, the Planning Commission clarified that the unit lot subdivisions would not create affordable units. Still, the Planning Commission sees this LUCA as a way to create a variety of housing choices in Bellevue in response to Strategy B of the Affordable Housing Strategy, broadening home ownership opportunities, promoting a diversity of housing types, and minimizing barriers of construction of housing units, thereby increasing the city's overall housing supply. The Planning Commission directed staff to prepare the LUCA for a public hearing on January 13th. On January 13th, the Planning Commission heard the public hearing for the proposed unit lot subdivision LUCA. Many members of the public provided testimony during the public hearing. All oral communications supported the proposed LUCA to establish provisions in the land use code for the unit lot subdivisions within land use districts where multifamily development is currently allowed. Upon further discussion, the Planning Commission recommended by a vote of 4-1 that the City Council adopt the unit lot subdivision land use code amendment without modification, since the LUCA meets the decision criteria of LUC 2030J135 and is consistent with a comprehensive plan, enhances the public safety and welfare, and is not contrary to the best interest of the citizens and property owners of the City of Bellevue. This recommendation is included in the Planning Commission resolution as attachment B of your packet. With that, I will turn it back over to staff to conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Oh, Mike, I think your mic.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair McGallico, for your presentation on the Planning Commission recommendation. So this last slide, well, second to last slide, so we're almost there, really is provided to provide some clarification in one spot of kind of where we are within the work plan on the various elements that have been discussed this evening related to ADUs. Again, as you heard, first off, the first line here, the 3-year wait is the issue before the council this evening in the proposed land use code amendment and the recommendation from the Planning Commission. The detached ADU is not before the council tonight, but is a part of the neighborhood planning initiative currently underway in both the Northeast and Northwest neighborhoods in the city. And that will be back to the council later this year as that work makes its way through the Planning Commission. The removing of the parking requirement, there is a amendment that is part of the parking reduction proposal for infrequent transit areas for multifamily projects. Last year, the state legislature passed an amendment that eliminated the requirement for ADUs within frequent transit areas. And that provision is being considered as part of that broader land use code amendment that will be before the council in the March-April timeframe. So again, there is a very narrow amendment to align the city's code with the state changes related to parking associated with ADUs within frequent transit areas. The reducing or eliminating the parking requirement that we currently have in our code for areas outside those frequent transit areas is not within the current work plan. And similarly, removal of the owner occupancy requirement that you heard Trisna explain at the beginning of the presentation is also not included in a current work plan. Next slide, please. So this one is our final slide just to show the council kind of where we are in the process and kind of the final steps moving forward. Again, it's been through the Planning Commission study session. The Planning Commission held the public hearing on January 13th. We're here this evening presenting the Planning Commission's recommendation to the council for these 2 land use code amendments. Tomorrow evening, there's a courtesy public hearing with the East Bellevue Community Council where they will hear of these 2 land use code amendments. And then at a future meeting, if directed by the council, we would return for final action by the council sometime most likely later this month if the council concurs. And then finally, back to the East Bellevue Community Council for a public hearing and approval, disapproval of these proposed land use code amendments should the council approve them within the jurisdiction of the East Bellevue Community Council. Next slide, please. So again, this evening we are seeking council direction to advance these code amendments for final approval at a future meeting with the council. And with that, Mayor, we will hand it back to you for any questions or comments from the council.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. And Chair Mulgafkar, thank you for the work of the Planning Commission and for coming down tonight to testify. I hope you can stay on the call here in case anybody has questions of you, okay? But you can turn your camera off if you want, just be around. So tonight, we're basically looking at the recommendations from the Planning Commission, which are dealing with two separate things. One is ADUs, whether to remove the 3-year waiting period. And the other is the unit lot subdivisions within land use districts and whether or not to allow that for where multifamily development is currently allowed, to allow the townhouses there. So those are the two things on the table. And Mike, you put up a slide, I think it was slide number 3, I'm not positive, where you basically listed all the current rules, because we'll do the ADUs first. So the rules that are in effect right now. So the owner presence, you know, living on the property and the parking requirement and the blah, blah, blah. So can you put that slide up again as reference? Because these are the rules already in place tonight. And really we're just talking about the 3-year waiting period, whether or not to follow the recommendation to get rid of that. So there, thank you. Slide 5, perfect. So we're looking at removing the one in yellow, but the other ones are already in place. So I'm going to give everybody a chance to comment and ask questions, and I'm going to let Councilmember Barksdale begin since he's the liaison for the Planning Commission, and then Councilmember Robertson, Stokes, Deputy Mayor Newhouse, Councilmember Zahn, Lee, and then myself in that order. So Councilmember Barksdale, would you like to start us off, please?
Will do. Thank you, Mayor. And also, I just want to thank the Planning Commission, Chair Mulgafkar, and the rest of the commissioners for the good discussion, the healthy discussion that they had during the Planning Commission meeting. And I think they laid out the process and how it went. And I know there was some misunderstanding in the community after that, but just wanted to thank them for that work. I support the recommendations from the Planning Commission for removing the 3-year wait and for allowing the subdivision of unit lots. And similar to how we've done in the past, you know, entertain the further recommendations that Planning Commission has brought to council. I support those as well. I think it's important for us to consider those and explore them, as was the language specifically was to explore them. And I think that's important with community engagement, looking at where it's worked in other cities so we can learn from those. And also would like for us to consider what programs and services we might also provide to complement those changes, so that because I think we're at an inflection point where it's partially about what gets built, but it's also about how we engage as a community and interact. And so I think it'd be interesting to think about what services and programs that might complement this growth. So I would love to see some alternatives related to ADUs specifically, and information about how we might, how we could proceed, instead of maybe just saying, let's not do these other things. Let's get past that and think about how we can support the removal of barriers for ADUs, while at the same time helping to make sure that the community engagement is part of that and building community. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Robertson.
Thanks, Mayor. You know, appreciate hearing from the Planning Commission on this. I really support, I think the council sent this to the Planning Commission saying we want this 3-year rule removed and we want to allow zero lot line development as low hanging fruit to allow different housing choice. So I really support that. And that's the question on the table tonight. With regard to additional ADU regulations, there may be some I might want to personally modify, but I don't think that that is the best use of the Planning Commission's time right now, or the council's time, or our planning staff's time. And the reason for that is, one, we made a promise to the neighborhoods that the detached ADUs would be part of the neighborhood area planning process. Now that has been delayed. That is not the neighborhood's fault. Having been on this council for more than, well, I don't even know how many years, 12 years or something, ADUs, particularly detached, have been very controversial, and not every neighborhood is the same. I would personally love to have a DADU in my backyard. I have the space for it. I have a nice big backyard. Would love to build one. Even if the city passed the law allowing it, I couldn't, because there's covenants on my property that wouldn't allow that. But we promised the neighborhoods that we'd be part of the neighborhood area planning process. So I think it needs to be part of the neighborhood area planning process. And the reason I don't think it's such a great use of the Planning Commission's time at this time is we have other major work to do. And those for this council and the Planning Commission is that we got to finish up East Main. We need to launch Wilburton, and we need to do the Bell Red look back. And if we're talking about affordable housing, adding changing ADUs so that we'll have more beyond what we're talking about tonight is really nibbling around the edges. If we really want to create more housing and we really want to make sure that there's affordable housing, because this wouldn't necessarily be affordable, we need to do bigger things. And that is making sure our growth areas have the capacity to have the affordable housing and the housing units for the missing middle. That means allowing more density around light rail station. That means as we change these land use codes for the growth area, that we have incentives for affordable housing or fee in lieu. That's the big things. That's the thing that's going to really make a difference. And I just wanted to remind this council that East Main was delivered to the council, and the whole process for the comp plan and land use code was started when Obama was still president, okay? When Obama was still president. And are we done with it? No, we're not. Wilburton CAC was delivered to the council almost 3 years ago. Have we even sent it to the Planning Commission? No, we have not. The Bell Red look back was supposed to happen in 2014. It's 2021. We could allow some major increases around those light rail stations with TOD and more affordable housing. We haven't even started it. Those are the things that we should be spending our time on, rather than nibbling around the edges and taking something that was supposed to be in this other process and putting it in this. So I absolutely support bringing this forward. I definitely am going to want to hear what happens at East Bellevue Community Council, because I would hate to see that they would reject this and not allow this housing type in their area. So I'm going to want to know that when it comes back. But I just don't think it's a really worthy use of our time at this point. It's going to be dealt with in the neighborhood area planning, and I'm good with that. Let's do the other things that are going to make way more of a difference. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Stokes.
Yeah, I think our concentration really is on the two items that are before us, and I agree with those. I think the staff and the Planning Commission done a great job, both on eliminating the 3-year wait period and having the unified lot subdivision process go forward. It's interesting with listening with great interest to my colleague, and I was at first thinking, wait a minute, but then she hit some notes that I've often talked about, is it shouldn't take us forever to do things, and we have things that are really important before us now that are affecting and are working on affordable housing. And I agree, we need to work on those. I do think that the ADU piece and the detached ADU piece will come up, and the planning is somewhere in between now and the end of the year. I think we should be aggressive on talking to the neighborhood areas about that, and we'll see what how that comes up. I don't think we need to put this off and come back later and say, well, 5 years ago, we said we're going to look at this and we haven't done it yet. So, you know, we need to balance these things. But I agree. I would like to see us be able to move on things in a little quicker fashion. And I hope it doesn't take us 3 or 4 years to implement these two things we're doing tonight. So I think I think staff and the commissions and the council are a lot more focused nowadays on moving things. I think this whole situation we're going through has given us some new energy and some new understanding that, you know, times change and things are not just going to go along for the next 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and we can kind of get something done along there. We need to move on things, and we need to move quickly now on affordable housing. You know, we put that together. I worked hard with council and with the mayor on this at the time. Well, I was working with myself and the current mayor to get that in place. And we need to move on that in a number of ways. So I agree that we need to look at what is the balance, what are the most important things we want to work on and move those forward. And not forget these items we have on here, but get these two pieces done, really start focusing on affordable, all the issues of affordable housing and homelessness, concentrate on those, and where pieces like this can come in, as has been suggested by some of the people, some of the comments we've had will be helpful. We can add those, but we have to be, we talk about being nimble, but now is the time. And if we don't get something done quickly here, we're going to be way behind and we will be overcome by all the people coming in, all the stuff that is happening. And so we have this great opportunity to move forward. Really good work tonight, really good conversation and comments from people from the audience, from the community. So let's adopt these two and then start working on these other things with some alacrity so we can actually deal with the problem and do something with it, not just talk about doing something with it. So
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, great. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. First, just want to thank Mike and Trisna and Nick and the Planning Commission for their work on this. Obviously, important work. And speaking of the Planning Commission, I believe that this was passed 5-1. I believe one of the commissioners voted against this. And I'm just curious if we can get just a very quick recap about what the issue was that prevented this from being a unanimous vote.
Do you want me to answer that or staff?
I'm fine either or.
Well, I'll start and I'll let staff go. I believe that it was Commissioner Davados who voted against it, and he was concerned that this wasn't fair to the neighborhoods. I think it just boiled down to that. It was a brief statement about the neighborhoods this might not be fair to what they wanted.
I'm going to weigh in here because I actually spoke with him about this today. And I asked him why, and he gave me a little different story. He said because it was presented as an affordable housing strategy and he didn't feel that it actually created affordable housing. However, he was in support of it in general. So there's a couple.
I appreciate that.
Does staff want to weigh in?
Actually, that's enough. I think I'll move on to my next question, but thank you, Mayor, for that. Next question is for staff. I think Trisna, so based on the math I saw out there, I think we're looking at potentially that this could, this removal of this 3-year rule could equate to about 40 units a year, potentially, maybe more. Does staff has any sense of how many ADUs might be created once this is lifted almost immediately? And then going forward?
Yes, thank you, Deputy Mayor. That is the numbers based on permit data, approximately 25%. So in that 35-40 range of units, we're expecting to be able to have ADUs right away as part of their new construction.
Gotcha. And there's no mandate, right, in terms of what a property owner could charge for rent for that unit, right? We don't. Exactly. So in that case, I would kind of agree that I think Commissioner Davalos had a point where this really does feel like more of a housing supply versus affordable housing. Certainly, if a property owner can make more money off of it, they certainly will, unless a family member is living there or what have you. So, and I'm generally in support of both of these. Lifting the 3-year wait makes complete sense for us, and I'm in favor of it. I have to agree with Councilmember Robertson. I think we should pump the brakes a little bit on some of those other suggestions. And it looks like, as Mike pointed out earlier, that we have a pathway to discuss those when they do come up. But we've got a lot of other things on our plate as well, but generally in support. So again, thanks for the great presentation.
Thank you. Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So I thank the staff and the Planning Commission as well for this work. I didn't realize how many years I'd been sitting waiting for us to adopt this. So I'm glad that it moved up in priority. I do think that there's urgency to both provide a variety of housing stock as well as affordable housing. So I support the ADU and removing the 3-year wait for new construction, as well as the unit lot subdivision. As I'm thinking about what I've heard today and information that's come in, I think that it's both about a variety of housing choices, as well as affordable housing. I think we need both for the amount of population that we're anticipating as part of our growth management and our Vision 2050. And to that end, when I think about the discussion on incentives for developers, I do sometimes also think about what is the incentive for affordable housing for homeowners. So the ability to have an ADU so that those that are aging in place and on a fixed income have the ability to be able to rent part of their home. Certainly we've heard that as part of stability and people being able to age in place in Bellevue, that is a consideration. I also agree that there are a lot of things we need to work on related to the Bell Red Look Back, Robertson, East Main. And yet I have seen that in Bellevue, we can do lots of things at the same time. So I would say that for me, I look at this as a yes and not an either or. So I would suggest to my fellow council members that in addition to looking at those large pieces of work related to Bell Red Look Back, Robertson, East Main, that this is another piece of the entire puzzle for Bellevue to look at those further explorations recommended by our Planning Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Zahn. Councilmember Lee.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I think most council members articulated very well. We all need more housing. We need variety of housing. Why not? And we've been talking about affordable housing for a long time. Bellevue is an expensive place. We all know that. And more people want to live here. As a result, the prices got pushed up. And so it's unfortunate. But our focus is on affordable housing. So I support, absolutely, we need to have more housing, look at more varieties. But, I sympathize with Commissioner Davalos. Because the reason is because when we talk to the public, the people who are out there, who are not so intimately as we are looking at from the inside out, they are being told that it's just affordable. So to be affordable, it's not just a matter of what kind of housing we have, but it's the cost. It's the cost. It's got to be a lower cost. And if it is not, then it doesn't meet the affordable criteria. And so so I agree that we need to have more housing. As a result, 3-year rule should probably, I agree, it should be removed. Should make it easier. Should make it easier to have a variety of choices, because we all change. When you get older, you want to downsize, you want to have a choice. You want to live in Bellevue. You don't want to be going somewhere else. I'm getting to be that point. So I think it's definitely a good thing to do. And so by having smaller lots and all that stuff, it's all good mechanisms. There's not just one way of doing that. You know, people have been doing this all over the world, and we can do a lot of things to do it. And so the point is that if I agree with Councilmember Robertson 100%. It's a practical matter. When we talk to the citizens, when we tell them it's unaffordable housing, when we tell them what we're doing, and when they see that it doesn't really quite fit that, they have fits. So when we're nibbling around the edges, when they don't understand what we're trying to do, we are having a very uncomfortable conversation. And so my question is, when we do this online engagement, how much of input do we get from the people really in the neighborhoods? So I think to do justice, to let people know what we're doing, this is a big project, big deal. Because
let me interrupt you for 1 second. Trisna, do you want to speak to the community process? Like what kind of an outreach or response did you get? And at Planning Commission as well, the public comment.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I'm going to turn this over to Nick. He has more information on this.
Great, thank you, and thank you, Mayor, for the question, and Councilmember Lee. So the outreach involved the 2 web pages that we created. So if we're talking about the ADU specifically, a lot of the messaging was around what's before you today. So the removal of the 3-year wait period. I did get a number of inquiries from people that actually have permits in the pipeline that would like to incorporate ADUs into their homes where they wouldn't be able to do so today. So we did hear from the public in that regard. We heard from a lot of members that wanted to comment on, I would say, provisions that were outside of the scope that council provided us in terms of the 3-year wait period. So there's certainly interest in talking about some of those other provisions, but really we tried to kind of focus that conversation on the 3-year wait removal, which we did see broad support for with the public.
Well, again, I think you're talking about people who are interested in ADU, who are looking at ADUs, but the general public. I think that's the reason why it's so important we go to the neighborhood planning process, because neighborhood represents the whole city. You know, they're concerned about neighborhood characters and all that stuff. So I sympathize completely with employers such as, you know, we heard from Amazon. Yes, the employees want to have a place to live, a choice of homes and all that stuff. Absolutely, we need to provide many, many more homes because the growth is demanding it. Then that goes with transportation, everything else, right? But ADU is, but we're talking to people. They are glad to believe that we're talking about affordable. The cost is a big consideration. So I think it's important to let the neighbors on board that they understand that, you know, we are talking about general increasing of housing stock, as well as creating affordable housing at cost basis. So I think otherwise, we're going to be hearing from people all over the place. Every time we bring up issue, we want to do something. These are all incremental things we're doing, which is very important. Absolutely, I agree 100%. We need to do them, but they are incremental. There are other things we can do, many things we haven't thought about that we can do.
Thank you, Councilmember Lee.
Appreciate
that. And, you know, I'll tell you, it's my turn to talk. You characterized Mr. Davidos's comments very well in your discussion there. And I agree with you. This increasing housing stock and inherently, you know, we hope that housing prices go down as housing stock increases. I looked at this from the Bellevue Network on Aging perspective, which I was on when we first started looking at ADUs. It was really to preserve the ability of an aging Bellevue resident to have the choice to either stay in their home or downsize in their neighborhood, you know, and rent out their home and downsize into an ADU. And so it was about aging in place, maybe getting a little income to help pay for property taxes and being able to stay within the neighborhood. And actually the second item that we're voting on with the townhouses is another one that preserves people who are downsizing the ability to stay closer to their neighborhood. So one statistic that's really interesting is that 50% of the housing available in Bellevue right now is single family home. and 50% of single-family homes are occupied by 1 or 2 adults. And the average single-family home in Bellevue is a 4-bedroom house. So that's a lot of house for a few people, but you know, as an empty nester myself, there's not a whole lot of places to downsize. So I think that if we create more opportunities for people to downsize if they want to, if that's their choice to do that, and reduce their expenses, but be able to stay in Bellevue, I think that we will open up single family home stock to families who want to come and have their kids walk to school and have a safe street and all the good that comes with raising your family in Bellevue. So I'm very supportive of these 2 recommendations from the Planning Commission. And I look forward to more discussions on this. I think the detached dwelling units, I'm looking forward to robust neighborhood discussions that might help us characterize what's best for the entire city. And that will come with a good community process. And I agree that we shouldn't be taking so long to do things. I think there's a real feeling that we've got like 3 years before light rail comes into Bellevue, and we need to get moving on this sooner than later. So, and I see you, Councilmember Barksdale. So let me finish. So I'm really excited at the movement that we're having right now. And I'm looking forward to more conversations on this. So I will be supporting both of the Planning Commission's recommendations, and I'm going to let Councilmember Barksdale have another bite at the apple here. Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment that, you know, I agree that there's a lot of work on our plate, and I don't think this has to, understanding more about where the community is and how we can help promote ADU development, lower the barriers in a way that still builds community, has to take that long. The challenge with the Great Neighborhoods program is that we're 7 years out from completing that Great Neighborhoods program. And so if we're waiting 7 years before we have the discussion again about ADUs, that's a long time, especially given the point that you just made, Mayor, that light rail is coming here in 3 years. So I would love
Barksdale, may I just clarify something? When you say ADUs, and that's probably the lingo you're using at the Planning Commission, you're talking about detached dwelling ADUs, correct?
So
not just, because we already have the ability to do ADUs, but we don't have the ability to do detached ones. So I think you're talking about moving quickly on the ability for people to possibly do detached ones in our next conversations, correct?
So I'm including detached in that conversation, just saying.
You're trying to include it in tonight's vote?
Nope, I'm saying
okay.
I would like, I'm saying that just noting the timeline for the Great Neighborhoods program, which we've talked about as being an avenue and how long that takes. So I think there's some value in saying, how do we do a shorter term review of like removing barriers for ADUs generally, because if we, versus just about the ADUs, but just generally removing the barriers.
So how do we do a robust public process that doesn't take 7 years?
Yes.
Got it. I think we're all in support of that one. So thank you for bringing that to light, because I agree with you, and I think we all do. We need to get that conversation going. And so I know we're scheduled to do it with our first 2 to 4 neighborhoods, but as a, you know, waiting for the whole process, maybe there's a way we can engage the other neighborhoods more quickly. So that's something that we'd like staff, I'm sure, to look at, how to do a little quicker of a robust community process to have that discussion, not preordaining what the outcome's going to be.
Right.
So tonight we are going to vote on the Planning Commission's 2 recommendations. And I'd like our Deputy Mayor to make a motion, please.
Certainly, Mayor. I move to direct staff to proceed with preparing ordinances on the recommended land use code amendments for final action at a future meeting.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, terrific. Good conversation. Thank you. So Mr. Miyake, what's next? Oh, I don't hear you yet.
Sorry, I needed to unmute. Sorry about that. So The next item is with respect to a discussion on the House Bill 1590 interest statement. And just by way of background, Mayor and council members, that council enacted Resolution 9826 on October 12th of 2020, which allowed Bellevue to collect the 0.1% sales tax for the use for affordable housing and behavioral health services. We also, again, refer to that as House Bill 1590 money. This was last in front of council, this topic of House Bill 1590 money. It was last in front of council on December 14th of 2020, where council initiated a work plan regarding the implementation of the use of these funds. Tonight, staff is returning to the council related to the first element of the work plan, and that is development of the interest statement for council consideration. Joining us tonight is Matt Cummins, the Director of Community Development. We have Stephanie Martinez, also our Homeless Outreach Coordinator with the City Manager's Office, as well as Lisa Olson, Management Fellow of the City Manager's Office. Before I turn over to Matt, staff is seeking direction from the council for purposes of adopting the interest statement. So with that, I'll turn it over to Matt.
Okay, thank you, City Manager Miyake and Mayor Robinson, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and Council. We're excited to be back with you here this evening to have the first of several study sessions around the implementation of and the moving towards prioritization of spending the 1590 funds. As we start our introduction this evening, I thought I might just quickly mention, I think this is actually the first presentation with the council for both Lisa Olson, who's a management fellow with the city and the city manager's office, and Stephanie Martinez, who's our homelessness outreach coordinator. So just want to welcome them to the fray, and they're going to be walking through the actual interest statement here in a few minutes when we get to that. I thought by way of background, as we start to put up the slides, talking a little bit about, so we were here last in December, as City Manager Miyake mentioned. At that time, we indicated to the council that the work program would likely involve a number of study sessions, starting here as soon as we could after the first of the year. So tonight's the first of those, and then going through roughly the springtime. And we're anticipating between 6 and 8 study sessions, depending on the council and working through the decision-making process. So tonight is the first of those, and we're going to walk through the overall work program with you and then talk about what the next steps are. So if we can flip to the next slide, Lisa, thank you. So the direction we're looking for from the council this evening is adoption of the proposed interest statement that was contained in your packet. And there's a couple components to that we want to mention, and you're going to hear this a couple of times tonight. The interest statement that we're asking you to reflect on and adopt this evening is a consolidation of existing policies. There are no new policies contained in that interest statement. It is formatted in narrative and paragraph form around 9 separate principles, which are the consolidation of a number of policies from a number of different documents, notably the city's comprehensive plan series, many elements, the affordable housing strategic plan, and the human services needs update. So we believe that this interest statement will be an opportunity, if adopted, to allow us to start approaching our regional partners and the service providers and/or the development community and a number of folks, as well as our community, start to talk about evaluating the different funding opportunities within the 1590 funding stream. So let's flip to the agenda slide. Tonight, what we'd like to do is go through the work plan overview and talk about how the interest statement fits into that. We're also looking at revisiting exactly what the 1590 funds can be used for. Now, we're not going to talk tonight about use of the 1590 funds. We're just going to be talking about the interest statement. But we also know there's a lot of misunderstanding out in the public, and we're getting a lot of questions at the staff level, and I'm sure you are as well, where folks think this is just a homelessness program or this is just an affordable housing program, and there are very specific allowances for what you can do with the 1590 funds. So we plan on actually covering that at pretty much all the study sessions. There may be some new viewers that will want to see that information. We'll talk a little bit about the existing policies and how they were consolidated and rolled into the interest statement. And then we'll actually go through the 9 principles in the interest statement for you all. and then talk about the next steps, assuming that you adopt the statement this evening. So if we go to the next slide. So this is the overall work plan, and we're building towards a prioritization and a set of recommendations on what we would want to use the 1590 monies to fund. And in our preliminary discussions with the council, there was a wide range of ideas and potential opportunities. So when we talked to the council in December, we set about an idea of putting together an interest statement. And one of the main goals of putting together that interest statement was to see what policies the city had already adopted that were applicable to the 1590 House bill, and or to see if there was any gaps in policy. In other words, was there a need to create any new policy based on some of the ideas for project types or funding or geographic distribution or a whole host of things that came up? And what we found was there really aren't any gaps. The city has tremendous policy around affordable housing, need for different types of that housing, human services needs, gaps in funding, and it's actually identified quite a bit of things that the 1590 funds could fit into very nicely in terms of that space. So the idea for the work plan was to create an interest statement that would put all of those policies in one place. And the value of that is it allows us to go talk to all the folks I started to mention earlier, and each of you individually has given us a number of different ideas of different governmental entities, housing consortiums, developers, and the like, to start that dialogue. And if we can take an adopted interest statement that has all the city's policies put into those topical buckets with references to the policies themselves all in one place, that will greatly aid us as we start our evaluation of the universe of alternatives, some of which may not make sense in Bellevue for a variety of reasons, and some may make a lot more sense depending on all the different variables that you're all going to be considering. So the other value of the interest statement is it helps to identify the needs in the community, and that stems right out of the affordable housing work and the human services work. So by identifying those needs in the written document, we'll have something that we can take to people and leave with them and continue to take feedback about potential projects and potential deals. Another main point that I'm going to mention here, it's not overtly in the interest statement, but it's going to move pretty quickly here, is the idea of early wins and how we can start to advance some of these things, because we know there are a lot of service providers and or would-be project developers that are interested in participating in the program. So let's go on to the next slide, Liesl. So we talked earlier about how we would go through the funding itself and the opportunities. House Bill 1590 breaks the funding stream. And again, just in round numbers, in working with our finance department, that 0.1%, we believe will likely yield somewhere around $9 million, of which 50% can have debt issued against it. So, and again, we're not talking about how we may spend the money tonight, but we'll reiterate that at all the meetings. At least 60% of whatever monies are collected must be spent on creating and constructing affordable housing, constructing facilities that provide housing-related services and mental and behavioral health facilities, and then a series of operations and maintenance things related to those. Within that, there are very specific requirements for that housing and housing-related services, and the targeted populations need to be at 60% AMI or less. And specifically, only the following populations can be served: persons with mental and behavioral health disabilities, veterans, senior citizens, homeless or at risk of being homeless, families with children. And that's important because it's one of the most misunderstood parts of House Bill 1590. It is only homeless families with children or unaccompanied homeless youth, young adults. It is not just an overall homelessness program. And the last category, domestic violence survivors. And so those are the requirements to go with the construction of the housing or housing related services. No more than 40% of the money can be spent on the operation, delivery, and evaluation of the mental and behavioral treatment programs and the housing related services. Generally, that's what people are referring to as the human services bucket to provide those types of treatment programs and so forth. So it's not to say that the split would have to be 60 and 40. It's just that House Bill 1590 says that at least 60% has to be spent on that whole first category that I mentioned, and then no more than 40% would be spent on the human services part. And when we get into the prioritization discussion with you all, how we decide to split up those monies as a council here for you will be a pretty important choice. And again, that comes downstream because there's a number of variables that will go into that. But again, it's not a static model. So the opportunity to change your prioritization year to year, every couple of years, depending on what makes the most sense, will be there. And this is an ongoing revenue stream. So that $9 million a year looks like it will be there for some time. Let's go to the next slide, Liesl. So the point I want to make on this slide, and then I'll hand it over to our project managers, relates to, again, this idea of consolidating existing policies. We took those and put them into thematic areas as principles because we believe that's the best way to articulate the city's identified needs and policies around bridging that gap to create the types of policies and or treatment for folks that this funding stream would allow. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Liesl Olson, one of our project managers, to walk you through the interest statement.
Great, thanks, Mac. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me this evening. I'll just expand a little bit on the consolidation of existing policies. Like Mac mentioned, we worked with a cross-departmental work team to identify the relevant policy documents that were related to the use of the HB 1590 funds. Some of those documents that we used were the comprehensive plan, including the human services, the housing, and the economic development elements, the affordable housing strategy, the 2019-2020 human needs update. That really helped us identify the needs and the themes to kind of have that broad understanding of the human services needs in Bellevue. We also looked at documents like the Diversity Advantage Initiative and the Economic Development Plan. So the work team worked with these documents, again, to look at all applicable policies, needs, and strategies, really looking to identify any gaps with policies that Bellevue already has. And we did not end up finding that. And so you'll see this consolidation of existing policies and documents in your council packet as attachment B. And just again, to reiterate what Mac talked about, these principles are describing current adopted policies of this city. They were created through weaving together policies that came through the existing documents and were identified themes across these interconnected policies related to affordable housing, housing-related services, and mental and behavioral health services. So with that, I will take you into our interest statement. This is presented in your council packet as attachment A. And as has been previously mentioned, this interest statement, we believe, will effectively and efficiently address the community needs in Bellevue and really serve as that guiding document to help us prioritize HB 1590 funding. The first principle in the interest statement is focus on closing the affordable housing gap. We know that there is a significant affordable housing gap for households at income levels between 0 and 60% AMI in Bellevue. Our policies acknowledge this gap. We see these policies in the comprehensive plan housing element, in existing strategies within the affordable housing strategy, in needs identified in the human service needs update. And we believe, existing funding is really insufficient to meet this housing need, especially for those households who may be experiencing housing instability. And so this revenue source is really going to be critical in helping to address this housing gap and add those units that can really serve our economically diverse households in Bellevue. The second principle within the interest statement is increase housing types and opportunities. So to really meet the diverse affordable housing needs for residents, there is this need to increase kind of a broad range of housing choices to, again, serve those income levels between 0 and 60% of AMI. We see this represented in existing policies through the comprehensive plan housing element, and again, in strategies in the affordable housing strategy and the economic development plan as well. So policies that provide a range of housing choices, encourage partnerships with housing developers on providing that array of housing options, encouraging housing opportunities in different settings throughout the city. So providing this variety of housing types will really ensure that affordable housing in the city fits the needs of our residents in Bellevue. The third principle in the interest statement is adopt a citywide approach. This principle really speaks to the city's commitment to support affordable housing, behavioral health, and housing-related services that are located throughout Bellevue. So again, this speaks to the geographic distribution of these programs and services, ensuring that they are easily accessible and located throughout Bellevue, and avoiding concentrating facilities and services. This is mentioned in numerous existing policies, again, within the comprehensive plan human services element, and also in the housing element by supporting a network of service points and ensuring that affordable housing opportunities are located throughout the city at a range of affordability levels. So with that, I will turn it over to Stephanie to go through the remaining principles in the interest statement.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Liesl. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council, thanks for having me here tonight. I'm Stephanie Martinez again, the Homelessness Outreach Coordinator for the city. So bringing us back to some of the principles. So our fourth principle is meet the spectrum of housing and service needs. So there's a wide range of housing types and service needs identified in our already adopted documents and policies, such as those in the housing element of the comprehensive plan, the human services needs assessment, affordable housing strategy, and strategies in our economic development plan. All of these documents really speak to the increasing need of services and programs that serve a variety of households and our most vulnerable populations. And as we know, a sustainable economy really requires that we build more housing choices for diverse income level households throughout the city, while at the same time, the city can continue to be adaptive and responsive towards the changing needs in the community that contribute to an individual or family's economic, housing stability, and just overall well-being. And going to the fifth principle, advance the continuum of human services. So from our human services needs assessment, as well as the human services element in the comprehensive plan, really the development and the identification of opportunities that are preventative in nature and provide those more upstream responses are key in addressing a variety of human services needs. So for example, by closing the affordable housing gap and by increasing access to mental and behavioral health services, we can really provide more upstream responses that help stabilize and resolve current housing crises, as well as any future crises or mental or behavioral health crises. The types of housing and services that can be funded through the use of HB 1590 really advances our current continuum of human services so that we're not only able to intervene and respond to current crises, but also prevent future housing instability and other crises. And these funds can contribute to the enhancement of our current networks of programs and services, providing a safety net of sorts that serves to address and prevent housing instability. And our last one on this slide, number 6, the sixth principle is enhance equitable and accessible housing and supportive services. As we know, Bellevue is a racially and economically diverse community with over 39% of the Bellevue population identified as foreign-born and about 50% of the population being of non-white race or ethnicity. Bellevue really remains committed to enhancing equity and access to the spectrum of housing and supportive services that we've discussed tonight. Through the creation of housing choices and supportive services that support our economically diverse households, such as those through 0 to 60% AMI, Bellevue can really advance our accessibility to our vulnerable communities, our underserved communities, and those that are disproportionately affected by housing instability and homelessness, such as our communities of color. HB 1590 funds can really be that tool that enhances our current action and commitment because the funding really does focus and allows us to address these sort of systemic and structural factors that lead to homelessness, housing, and economic instability because these funds can really close the affordable housing gap and enhance the behavioral health services as well. And next slide, please. Going to principle 7, strengthen and foster self-sufficiency to achieve potential across all of the documents that we continue to discuss tonight, such as the Human Services Needs Assessment, the Affordable Housing Strategy, and the Economic Development Plan. There's really a shared identified theme across all of these documents. And it's really that by addressing these systemic factors, such as affordable housing crises and the need for mental and behavioral health services, we are ultimately fostering self-sufficiency, human potential, and housing and economic stability across our most vulnerable and economically diverse populations. By delivering the services as outlined in HB 1590, we can continue driving towards our City Council vision of achieving human potential and support in individuals and families' overall well-being and quality of life in the city. And focusing on number 8, enhance community collaboration. So as we know, there's existing community partners locally and regionally that are addressing the affordable housing crisis already, homelessness, and gaps in access to mental and behavioral health services. So as highlighted in policies such as the comprehensive plan with human services and housing elements, as well as the economic development plan, it's really critical for us to continue to promote, build, and actively work on these partnerships. And some folks that we were thinking about are public and private institutions, our regional partners, our faith-based communities, businesses, including those that are affordable housing developers, our affordable housing providers, and our community-based organizations as well. And also providers that provide culturally specific services. Through this collaboration, this will really allow us to meet the variety of housing types and needs in Bellevue, but it'll also really help us collaborate, coordinate, and really leverage resources while being in coordination to address these sort of shared needs. And again, this collaboration will further allow us to develop our priorities and remain strategic in our short and long-term efforts as well. And last but not least, going to number 9, be an active and collaborative regional partner. The affordable housing crisis, as we know, and the services gaps for mental and behavioral health services is a national, regional, and local issue. But Bellevue remains committed to advancing local and our regional strategic efforts towards addressing housing instability, homelessness, and the affordable housing crisis. So in order to enhance these efforts, we recognize and acknowledge the need to address these regional and national issues in collaboration and in coordination with our regional partners. And with these active regional partnerships, we can remain innovative, efficient, effective as well in our local response to address the Bellevue specific needs that involves the coordination across all levels as well. So with that last one, I'm going to turn it back over to Mac to talk about next steps.
All right, thank you, Stephanie. So the work plan contemplates the adoption of an interest statement this evening, and then moving directly into the stakeholder outreach and or starting to evaluate and analyze the various opportunities that the 1590 funds could be used for, with an idea to come back to council every 4 to 6 weeks with a new study session to be working through the different variables and or the different opportunities to eventually land somewhere between 5 and 7 study sessions from now on a set of prioritizations that would give guidance for how you would like the first set of monies to be allocated. So we imagine a very robust discussion at the next study session around the kinds of feedback that we're hearing and where the opportunities really lie within Bellevue, as well as some initial staff analysis. So with that, let's move to the last slide, which is the direction slide. So tonight specifically, we're requesting direction to adopt the proposed interest statement as contained in your packet. So with that, I am happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure Lisa and Stephanie will as well.
Okay, great. That's a terrific presentation. I appreciate it. And Lisa and Stephanie, it's nice to see your faces at the meeting tonight. And of course, Mac, yours as well, but we see you more often. So I'm going to give everybody a chance to comment or ask questions in this order. Councilmember Stokes, followed by Councilmember Lee, Zahn, Robertson, Barksdale, Deputy Mayor Neuenhuis, and then myself. So Councilmember Stokes, do you want to start us off, please?
Absolutely, thank you. I have to say, I am so excited about this. You know, we have a great base for this with our affordable housing strategy, and strategies have to be put into play. And you know, we had a good discussion about this 1590 money and how it would, how we would use it and how it would help us really elevate our game. And we're doing that. And I think it's really great work staff has done. I appreciate the focus, and I agree with you know, the setting up this the work plan this way. And I think we are getting ourselves set to really do what we've been talking about for some time in a very effective way. And I see this as something that will keep moving along. And I appreciate the fact that we will have, you know, frequent planned updates on this, which is very important. Sometimes we go for a long time and don't do that. So this is a good move forward. I really don't have any questions. I mean, I think the strategy follows what we've been talking about for some time. It takes us back to 2015 when we came up with our vision statement and with our priorities over the time period. And then as we've progressed as a council and as a city working together to come up with affordable housing and homeless strategies, which are all intertwined. I think following up on our taking advantage of the opportunity that dropped into our laps at the, you know, a couple of months ago or so, we have made great strides. And I'm just excited about getting this going forward. So I don't have any questions. You know, we can always think of questions, but I think what we have before us is a work plan, and I'm really excited about seeing this going forward. And I do, of course, I always believe that it's very important to work on this both in Bellevue and regionally, because, well, one of the things is a majority of the people who work in Bellevue live outside of Bellevue. So we do a lot of things that help and are affected for businesses and people who work outside and don't live in Bellevue, but who are here. And the same thing applies. So I think this gives us a leadership position, will give us a leadership position in the region, and it will end up making better Bellevue's approach to this and the services to people in Bellevue much better by doing that. So I'm excited about it and ready to go. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Kudos to the staff. This is well done. I mean, the way you put it, and I think really shows also kudos to the city of Bellevue. And you mentioned, you know, the city has all these specific programs already in place. Basically, you kind of just, you know, summarize it and figure out, you know, how to consolidate the programs and into an interest statement. And it's very, very, very well written, very well done. So I'm going to ask you only one question, which is regarding the citywide. We just went through this affordable housing discussion before this, so you know, still fresh. You know, this is something that combines all the programs we look at, which is important to the city, which is social. You mentioned economic, which is to me it's social, economic, and another one is age. One thing that is not specifically mentioned, we talk about affordable housing. You know, we're on the aging place. We don't want to leave the city because we have a different need for housing, and there's nothing there, right? So, and finally, it's a culture as well. You know, because like you mentioned, 39% of our population is foreign born, and they have different culture. And so that makes a difference, you know. I think that is a consideration. Then also ability, you know, ability means people of all sorts of needs that need to be considered. You know, it's also part of the housing as well, affordable housing. So I think this is really a very wonderful overall umbrella where you are building a physical supply, a provision, how to help our people. And specifically, in this case, it's housing. And that's a very major element of it. So I think this is very well done, very inclusive. except for what I brought up. Maybe you can answer a little bit on that one particular issue. How do you address age? How do you address social? How do you address culture? How do you address ability?
Thank you, Councilmember Lee. Can you answer that, Lisa or Stephanie?
Yeah, so in specifically related to age and ability, we kind of tried to incorporate that generally into the principles, I think specifically around kind of meeting the spectrum of housing needs and understanding that there's going to be a lot of needs that can fit underneath that guiding principle. I think also increased housing types and opportunities was one that we specifically looked at, specifically with Bellevue's policies related to aging, kind of fitting under that guiding principle.
And I'll just add something too for number 6, the enhancing equitable and accessible housing and supportive services. Age, ability, all of that falls into that principle as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's see, Councilmember Zahn.
Yes, thank you. I want to echo the good job to both of you, Liesl and Stephanie. I mean, I thought that the interest statement was very inclusive. It had all of the elements that we've been talking about. I really appreciated the consolidated policies as well, because to me, as I thought about this opportunity with the 1590 money, some of the statistics that really struck me was that 49% of Bellevue jobs earns less than $50,000 a year. And those are your dental assistants, hotel workers, baristas, and that 17% of the households in Bellevue earns less than $50,000 a year. That's 17% of our households, but only 6% of the units in Bellevue are affordable. So it makes me wonder, how are the other, 11% actually surviving living in Bellevue? And to me, I think that we need to be a community that really looks at how we support people being able to live here at all different income levels, and not just people that can afford the market rate rents that we have in Bellevue. So I really appreciated having that backdrop of need, because I think it really helps us frame why we're doing this work. Because if half the jobs in Bellevue are less than 50K and only 6% of the housing stock is affordable, there's an issue here. And I think it's going to exacerbate our transportation challenges if 94% of the people that work here are commuting from other places because they can't afford to be here. So anyway, I really appreciate this work, especially the one about equitable and accessible housing. I think it's a yes and of how we make that happen. And I really appreciate 1590 talking about homeless families, because what I hear is sometimes, as we come out of COVID, we might have families that are going to be in that cusp of losing their housing. And we'd want to make sure that there's an ability for them to stay together as a family, so you don't have parents in one place and kids having to be shuffled off someplace else. So I think that's important. My understanding is currently preservation is not in our interest statement because 1590 doesn't currently allow that. So if the state actually makes that change, will we come back and adjust our interest statement to allow to talk about preservation as well as building?
Matt, can you address that? Because my interpretation of that is a little different.
Yeah, so two different issues. The question of there is an allowance in 1590, and we are still working on exactly how this may get executed, but there is an allowance for the creation of new affordable units in existing buildings. And exactly how that would happen, or what, so we're going to be looking at that, and we're working with our city attorney's office, and that'll be one of the things that comes back to you all. On the broader question right now, yes, the state legislature is taking up some potential tweaks. We are not actually evaluating those tweaks through this process. We're moving forward here with Lisa and Stephanie using all of our existing policy, and then we'll be commenting through Joyce and the intergovernmental program on anything that comes through any changes at the state legislature. If and when the legislature adopts something, then we'll take a look at what that final bill is and pivot accordingly, either to an interest statement or any subsequent implementation plan.
Okay, and then the partnership would allow us to potentially infuse some of the 1590 money into development so that we get market rate all the way down to affordable housing in partnership, whether that's regionally or locally within Bellevue. Is that right? I just want to make sure.
Yes, I think if you're asking the question, can we subsidize units down to under 60% AMI? That's something we're looking into, and Councilmember Robertson asked us that exact same question. So can we look at market rate buildings and try to buy down the units to 60% or 30%? So that's one of the things you'll be taking up at your next couple study sessions.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a really important part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Robertson.
Hey. So Stephanie and Liesl, great job on your first council Zoom game show. The PowerPoint was excellent and your presentation was excellent too. Good job, Mac, also. You know, like my colleagues, I'm very excited about this 1590 opportunity. I was very happy to support it. I definitely want to see, you know, the council is going to want to have a high touch with this. So I'm glad that you're coming back a lot, because rather than just adopting an interest statement and saying, go do it and bring us back budgets, that is not the way I personally want to go. I don't think my colleagues want to go that way either. That said, I think that the interest statement, it does a good capture of where we are. And I particularly like the last three, number 7, 8, and 9. It doesn't really tell us where we want to go and how we want to spend the money and how we want to prioritize it. And so that's where, you know, I wish that this had circulated like our legislative interest statement did with council before it was daylighted in a meeting, so that we could have input into it as it was being developed, because I really would like to see more specificity. So for example, you know, because this doesn't really specify on what we hold most dear. I'd like to prioritize affordable housing in TOD areas around high capacity transit. I'd like to make sure that the affordable housing is dispersed throughout the city, as well as within projects themselves. I'd like to prioritize the services as well as residential units for people who are already in Bellevue or who are working in Bellevue. We need to look at what our community needs are and step up and serve those. When it comes to among the groups, I'd like to prioritize making sure that those families, as Councilmember Zahn said, that may be losing their homes, that may be homeless kids in the Bellevue School District, I want to prioritize serving them. I want to prioritize serving the youth who've grown up in Bellevue and now can't afford to live here when they're out of the house. So I'd also like to support services that move people out of homelessness into stable situations and self-sufficiency. That's kind of captured in number 7. I also really like the partnership idea. I love the preservation idea. I know that we've talked about that. I'd like to see that in here. And I'd like to see something in here about or taking advantage of early wins and being nimble, because when we are prioritizing, I'd like to have it, whatever we're prioritizing, be clear enough so that the staff knows what projects we're looking for, how we want to spend the money, but also not be so strict that we can't be nimble if a great opportunity comes up. So I'd like to somehow get that in there. And I don't know whether that can be woven into the interest statement or whether that's going to come forward in a prioritization and implementation plan. But whatever it is, this reads like a comp plan, kind of, because it is. It's taken from those policies. But the comp plan doesn't really decide how Bellevue, it's the goal of how we want to develop Bellevue, but where the rubber meets the road is in our land use code. So I'm looking forward to how are we going to do basically the land use code equivalent for the 1590 money, because that's where council's prioritization and a little bit more specific direction will really come into play. So I guess my question for Mac or whomever wants to answer it is, because I think this is great and I like it, but it's really not specific enough. It doesn't tell us how to go forward. So how are we going to get to the level of specificity where we find out the 7 of us, say we all want to prioritize families? How are we going to get there? And what's the next step in that? Because I understand we're going to be prioritizing, but it looks like this interest statement is just going to go to outreach without that level of specificity. And if you're trying to vet projects that are coming in, that doesn't really help. It's just too general.
So thank you, Councilmember Robertson. Yeah, the interest statement that you're looking at tonight is not the filter designed to do what you are getting to. So we imagine the next several study sessions being a refinement and the filter that you're talking about to get to the highest priorities. We would like to take the existing policies of the city out to start to vet the different variables that are going to go into your discussion, to be able to give you some feedback about where the early wins are and what types of projects are more realistic than others, maybe in the short, medium, or long term. A whole host of things that will help you in your discussions around how you want to try to prioritize those things. The outcome of which will likely be some type of implementation plan. It could be an amendment to this particular interest statement. We're still working on what that would look like for you all so that you can memorialize and document your prioritization decisions as you go through this process.
My recommendation, for what it's worth, is that when we come back to the implementation and prioritization, that we create kind of like our council vision, where we have the vision and then we have the priorities. I'd love to see something where we have the interest statement and then we have the prioritizations and then we have the implementation plan, because those are all three different things. And I think if we have that, because certainly we want a lot of high touch right now, but I envision setting this up so that in the future, it really is more of a budget issue with the council, that they're not vetting every little thing that comes in when there's opportunities. So that to me would be the right way to go. So, and if we're being asked to move on this tonight, if council wants to do that, I'm fine with that. But I just want to make sure that we get to the point where we can give that more specific feedback. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Barksdale.
All right, thank you, Mayor. I think my colleagues have already hit a number of the points that I wanted to hit, but I want to reiterate Councilmember Robertson's point, because I was actually going to bring up the implementation plan as well. I know that was a big deal for us as we were in the earlier discussions, and so I would also like to see that. And then as part of that, any sort of, and I imagine this would be part of it, any sort of metrics that would help us get a sense of how things are progressing through that. So for the outreach, just to clarify, is that coming back to us, not just the updates from the outreach, but the approach to outreach? Is that coming back to us as well?
It's not coming back as a decision point for you all. We had planned on updating you routinely as we start the outreach, and then we're going to be giving feedback in terms of the types of things that we're hearing. So at the last work session, you all gave us ideas about things you wanted to know about and specific entities that you wanted us to talk to. So if that you still have some questions there, just let us know. Just send us an email or something and we'll be happy to make sure that happens.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I just would looking to make sure that we're actually reaching the broad segments of our community. So if you could include that as part of discuss the results from the outreach, that'd be great. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember, Deputy Mayor Newhouse.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I will pile on, and certainly great presentation from everyone tonight. And I share many of my colleagues' thoughts. It's a great presentation. It's a very exciting time, and a time when that we really need these funds to address a lot of issues in our community right now, especially due to the pandemic. So this couldn't have happened at a better time. I mean, obviously, a lot of these issues regarding affordable housing, mental health, behavioral, all of those existed, but it's all been exacerbated due to the pandemic. So I also share Councilmember Robertson's thoughts, and also Councilmember Barksdale about some specifics, but I understand you got your plan. I'm a little bit impatient by nature, Mac, but we really want some early wins here. And I really hope that part of the outreach and part of the, identified needs, that we would make use of the Human Services Commission when they've gone through their assessment and needs. I mean, they've done a lot of this work already, and they've done it just recently in terms of where we've allocated a lot of funds. So in terms of hitting the ground even quicker, I think there might be some key learnings there that we might be able to take advantage of to help start to distribute some of these funds. Because my understanding is that we're going to start receiving money at the end of this quarter already. But given that the process that we're going through, we're at least another 18 weeks away before we finish this plan. It would just be great if we could have some of those early nice wins up front, even if they're smaller. I want to put this money to work as soon as we possibly can to start making an impact and helping people in need, be it mental health, behavioral, or getting someone into an affordable unit somewhere in Bellevue. I want to start putting this into action right away. So that's my only request. But again, fantastic presentation and really excited about where this is going, and so glad this is coming to us right now, and so proud of this council that we took this vote unanimously to take these funds for 1590. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm very proud to sit on this council amongst my colleagues who, with their passion for caring about the community, I mean, these comments are all outstanding. And I just have a few to say. Councilmember Zahn's comments, I would like to add to that as well, because I agree with her with just a few more statistics that over half of the renters in Bellevue are considered cost burdened, where they're spending more than 30% of their income on a month on housing. And only 10% of the housing available in Bellevue is affordable to a family of four earning $80,000 a year or less. That is not much affordable housing stock, and $80,000 a year is a lot of money. So that really gives a picture of the challenge that we have right now, and we're all feeling the need to move quickly, and I do too. The thing I really like about what you presented tonight is these are guiding principles, and I feel like as a healthcare professional, this totally makes sense to me. This opens all the doors to doing everything I think we need to do without being confining. So basically, whatever fits under these principles, we can do. How we are going to do it, what exactly we're going to do, we're going to define in the next steps. But this gives us guidance to make sure that we're making all the considerations that we need to do good work for everybody in the community. So I'm very happy with these principles. I think you've done an excellent job of consolidating all the work that the council has done in the past years and bringing what's pertinent to this bill forward so that we can utilize it. So thank you for doing that. I think unless anybody has anything more to say, I think we're ready for a vote. So a motion from the Deputy Mayor.
I move to adopt the House Bill 1590 interest statement.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Passes. Excellent. And I believe that we are done with this meeting. Very good meeting tonight. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. We are adjourned.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.